Welcome to the 23rd DCW Conversation Hour. The DCW Conversation Hour is an initiative by Deoband Community Wikimedia, a recognized user group affiliate of the Wikimedia Foundation. Established on July 2021, DCW is dedicated to enriching Wikipedia and its sister projects with knowledge related to global Muslim academia, scholarship, history, and culture. DCW leads several impactful initiatives, including the DCW Conversation Hour, Heritage Lens, and collaborative projects such as Deoband Yoruba Collaborative Project and the DCWK Editathon. These efforts exemplify DCW's commitment to significantly contribute to global knowledge and foster an inclusive, collaborative approach to open knowledge creation. Before we proceed, please note that this session is being recorded. For this month's session, we are excited to delve into the intersection of Wikipedia and artificial intelligence, a topic reshaping the knowledge sharing ecosystem. We are honored to have Dr. Matthew Vedder as our speaker. Dr. Vedder is a professor of English in Indiana University of Pennsylvania, an open knowledge advocate, and the author of Wikipedia and the Representation of Reality. With over a decade of experience in Wikimedia projects and a focus on writing, digital technology, and critical literacy, Dr. Vedder brings invaluable expertise to this discussion. In today's discussion, we'll explore how AI technologies, including large language models, are influencing Wikipedia's landscape, raising important questions about collaboration, ethics, and the future of open knowledge. Thank you for joining us for this enlightening session. And let's begin by welcoming Dr. Matthew Vedder. Yes, Dr. Vedder, we are glad to have you here. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ariba, and thank you to DCW community. These conversation hours are just incredible resources for engaging our communities and working to kind of advance the mission of Wikimedia's free knowledge. The archive, especially, I was looking at, is just a wonderful resource. But it's great to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides, and I'll get started with my talk in just a minute. Okay, can everyone see my slides, hear me okay?
Yeah, everything's good. Great.
All right. So thank you so much. So again, the title of my talk today is Wikipedia and AI, Ethical Boundaries in LLM Training. So a couple acronyms there. I think that we're all familiar with them, but I'll give a little bit of background here towards the beginning of the talk. Ariba did a wonderful job introducing me. I've been involved with the movement for about 10 years. A couple of things that I'm involved with that wasn't mentioned. I serve on the Regional Grants Committee for US and Canada. Um, and I also co-chair an initiative called the Four Cs Wikipedia Initiative. So that's for writing studies academics in my area to encourage them to contribute to Wikipedia. And as part of that, I work on wiki project writing in English Wikipedia. Writing Spaces is my kind of open educational resource textbook project for writing education. So I feel that that is kind of part of the free knowledge work that I do on the side, slightly apart from my Wikimedia work. But that's me. And this presentation is based on some ongoing research that I'm doing, really about the impact of large language models on Wikipedia's sustainability. So the research is currently documented on Meta, um, and I'll make sure that I share this presentation so that you all can get to those links. Um, and my research team is made up of Zach McDowell, who's a longtime contributor. He has done a lot of Wikipedia-based education work with me, and Jale Zhang, who's also a longtime contributor, um, who's kind of worked with me on artificial intelligence, especially generative artificial intelligence and its impact on the teaching of writing. Um, but our main questions were really like, how are these large language models trained on Wikipedia data, right? We had heard again and again that Wikipedia was one of the most important textual training data sets for these models that are running ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot and Google Gemini. And then also, how does this training affect kind of Wikipedia's sustainability? Obviously, I've been involved with Wikimedia stuff for just over a decade, and the movement means so much to me that it was hard to ignore the ways that newer, emergent AI applications might have the potential to harm our project. So that's really what the larger research project is about. And again, it's available and documented on Meta, and a lot of the findings are already there. Most of the research is already conducted. Um, it's currently under review. There's an article under review at a journal called AI and Society. I was just looking at it a few minutes ago. We hope to also publish a preprint version of the article, but we haven't gotten around to that yet. Okay, so today I'll talk a little bit about some of the background, as I mentioned, related to, the difference between AI, generative AI, and how large language models fit into that kind of paradigm. And then Wikipedia as a training set, right? Like, why is Wikipedia such an ideal way to train these language models? I'll talk a little bit about our research methodology before I skip over to kind of some of the findings from the research and some of the recommendations based on those findings. And of course, we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussions, I hope as well. So please bring your questions. If you think of something in the meantime, while I'm speaking, feel free to put it in the chat so that we'll have a record of it there. So when I'm talking about AI, I'm specifically talking about generative AI and the large language models that are um, at the source of those models and those applications functioning, right? So generative AI, I'm thinking about applications such as ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, and the ways that these applications could not run as effectively or efficiently without the very large corpora of textual data, right? And we know that Wikipedia is one of the most widely used and more heavily weighted textual data sets in the training of large language models. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a professor of English. However, large language models, I know, for people who teach writing have become a very important topic of discussion, of course, because we have to figure out in what ways should our writing students engage with, these generative AI models, so that they are still learning to develop their own writing skills, still being completely critical of the models and the ways they might hallucinate, being critical of the model's particular biases, while also learning to use the models and develop that particular emergent digital literacy. So I kind of come from the background of a writing teacher, as well as someone who has been and who has been following some of the emerging developments in the Wikimedia movement as it relates to generative AI. Okay. Um, but this model in particular, this diagram that I have on the slide, is really useful for kind of drilling down into what I'm talking about when I'm talking about AI and Wikipedia. There's a lot of ways to engage that particular topic, right? There's a lot of research on using generative AI to aid in writing and editing, and of course, Wikipedia has long had really useful, productive, automated bots and processes that help with the editing. But today I'm really thinking about Wikipedia as a textual training source that is used in some of this deep learning and natural language processing for large language models. Here, I just kind of have that definition of the large language model for people who that might be a new concept, right? Computational model designed for natural language processing, such as language generation, right? So that's kind of ChatGPT. Large language models acquire these abilities by learning statistical relationships from vast amounts of text during a self-supervised and semi-supervised training process. So the better structured and reliable the text is, right, the better these large language models are going to be able to train themselves to, function correctly, which is really where Wikipedia comes in. And of course, Wikipedia has a great article on large language models. So why is the encyclopedia such an ideal training data set for large language models? A lot of it comes down to Wikipedia's policy of verifiability, right? We know as editors of Wikipedia that verifiability um, ensures that there is a rigor, to the reliability of the content in main space articles, right? Everything is supported not only by a secondary source, but a reliable secondary source, and other editors can verify the accuracy and reliability of that information. So it's not only a massive amount of text for these large language models training, but it's also a massive amount of very reliable text because of the policy of verifiability. The fact that Wikipedia now exists in, I believe it's over 400 language versions now. I used to always say 380, but I believe it's over 400. But someone please correct me if I'm wrong on that. Means that it can really generate a lot of different language corpora for the training of these models as well. Obviously, its size and scope, and that Wikipedia articles, main space articles, are structured in some ways, right? Um, they have an internal assessment, the content assessment system, and that kind of metadata can be borrowed and used to further tune large language models. Of course, the free license is really important as well, although most Wikipedia content is CC by SA, and large language models are kind of remixing this content in a way that does not actually um, follow through with the attribution requirement part of the CC by SA. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Mhm. Anuj says that that is also why he thinks Reddit is considered a relatively great training data set.
Which is why. Why is Reddit considered good? Oh, because the license.
He thinks it's a relatively great training data set relatively to the Wikipedia.
Yeah, I was just asking. This is also why I was wondering if that was because it was the freely licensed or another reason.
Hi, Matt. This is Anuj. Sorry for interrupting. I didn't know my
Oh,
comment was being read out. But I think it's because of the verifiability, because of the community nature of question answering, and how people kind of agree or disagree on what is correct or wrong, just for that verifiability parameter that you mentioned.
excellent. Yeah. And there's a kind of an upvoting system to ensure that some of the best, right, responses are going to kind of float to the top. And that's a structure that could be used for the training of large language models. Yeah, thank you so much.
And just to confirm, are we encouraged to comment and interact while you're presenting, or should we hold our comments for the end?
I'm fine with you to interact while I'm presenting.
Great. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so a little bit about my study. This is a qualitative study. We are kind of moving from the methodology of a problem-centered expert interview. Okay, so that means that I really kind of defined the scope and the focus of the inquiry, in terms of those questions that I presented to you all earlier. Basically, I wanted to learn more about how this works and how it might be a problem. Okay. Um, and then I talked with what I deemed experts, highly specialized, who have highly specialized knowledge and interest in the intersections between Wikimedia and large language models. Okay. So, as you might imagine, I talked to a good amount of computer scientists and people in the movement. So, we had 6 expert participants that were interviewed, 8 semi-structured questions. We allowed for some follow-up and side discussions as well. Really amazing interviews, like some of the most meaningful research I think I've done in a long time, was getting to talk to these experts. And then I kind of have here some of the thematic analysis that we did with the data, transcription of, for instance, the Zoom recordings, de-identifying the data. All 3 of the researchers really kind of like dug in, read, familiarized themselves, and we did some coding and analysis, refinement of codes, and finally some selection of quotes that we could bring into the article, the research article. Um, and a lot of that data is available, documented on Meta. Um, I should try to get that quote for you all, but so in the methodology, I basically told folks that they could identify themselves or remain pseudonymous, with a pseudonym for the actual publishing of the research. So you can see here on the right, we have Denny Vrandachik. I'm not sure how his last name has an error in it, but head of special projects at Wikimedia. Stephen Harrison, a kind of a tech lawyer and journalist, author of the editors. Aaron Halfacker, longtime Wikimedia kind of tools and tech person, but is now principal applied research scientist at Microsoft. Luca De Alfaro, professor of computer science and engineering at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Someone who is very familiar with the Wikimedia movement as well as the implications of large language models and natural language processing. And then 2 pseudonymous expert participants who are working for the research team and technical staff at the Wikimedia Foundation itself. So I was really fortunate, and it speaks to the community that we have, to be able to talk with these folks. This is just some of our coding. You can see on the bottom we have these particular codes, sustainability, information literacy, Wikipedia as a training set, and you can see like the most frequent counts that those came up. Okay, so some of the key findings, and I'm not going to go through everything because again, I'll post that link and you all can look at it, and the article should be coming out soon. But I thought we would talk about three of the main findings, the ones that I have highlighted in this slide. One of these has to really do with large language model applications like ChatGPT, really as acting as a kind of an additional intermediary between users and the original knowledge sources, which can kind of cause issues, as we'll see. The second key finding I'll talk a little bit about is Wikipedia's sustainability, right? And how large language models and other kind of generative AI threaten that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about contributor expectations. You know, how does the use of Wikipedia as a large language model possibly alienate contributors who never really kind of agreed to this particular way of extracting data from the digital commons, right? We all participate and volunteer in this movement out of mainly altruistic motivations. So why is the data that we contribute being used to train these AI applications that are for profit, right? Why are we feeding big tech? Okay. So again, there's a couple of other findings there, but I'll try to focus on these three, and I think they really provide a lot of rich data and rich findings here. So like you'll see for each of these slides that I have some quotes sometimes. The E1 just stands for expert one. It's a direct quote from one of the interviews. Um, Disintermediation is actually a problem that has been ongoing, most notably with Google's Knowledge Graph project or Knowledge Panel project. So if you search something in Google and you see to the side, it draws data from Wikipedia. So it'll have that answer, right, that a user is looking for. Um, that is drawn from Wikipedia, but users don't actually have to visit Wikipedia, right? So that's kind of been known as the bypass. And there's some great work out there by Heather Ford and Andrew Iliadis and some other folks that have really critiqued this particular relationship. Because if Wikipedia is being bypassed, we know that folks aren't as likely to participate in the movement or to donate to the movement because they don't actually even go to the website. But this particular interview expert stated that large language model applications bring even stronger disintermediation than the Google Knowledge Panel because they are heavily customized to the question being asked. So think of a user of ChatGPT or Perplexity or Copilot or any of these generative AI models really being able to get the majority of their queries answered without ever having to leave that particular application, right? So they don't have to go to Wikipedia, despite the fact that the reason that these models are, accurate when they are accurate is because of Wikipedia. So information quality can suffer because of the fact that the large language models are kind of acting as remix engines. They may not be up to date or completely accurate, but the user might be trusting those instead of finding that information in Wikipedia. But really, there's this increasing distance between the original information and end user consumption. And I like to think of large language model chatbots as kind of a quaternary source. Okay. A fourth source, right? Wikipedia operates as a tertiary source. Okay. It collects and draws data from secondary sources that describe some aspect of the world or some piece of information. And then it kind of puts those together and there's an article there. Um, but then these chat GPTs are kind of one step removed from that. So it really creates a position in which the user, the human user, is so distanced from that original information that there's no data provenance. There's also very little attribution in some of these models. And it's increasingly kind of an information literacy problem, as well as a direct threat to Wikipedia's sustainability, right? So this is what links up to sustainability. Um, a couple of the interviewees really talked about how these large language models might lead to a kind of a shrinking of the digital commons, right? Because they're kind of like gobbling up all this data and then letting the user um, sit in and just work with that particular data remix without going into some of these other more crowdsourced projects or digital commons projects, right? So these are all direct ideas from the interviewees. Users may rely on large language models for quick consultations, bypassing Wikipedia, reducing opportunities for content improvement and content and community engagement. All interviewees warn that large language models could diminish the discoverability of Wikipedia, right? Leading to decreased donations and editorial contributions. Now, to be fair, some of these large language models, such as Copilot, they offer that data provenance in the sense that they'll tell you, oh, this information or this response is coming from Wikipedia, and then others don't. So some of them will give the user a way back into that particular digital commons project, right? And which isn't quite as problematic in this particular case. But overall, the sustainability of the Wikimedia movement is threatened by these applications if users just aren't accessing um, the projects. And then the third finding that I wanted to speak briefly to is contributor alienation. And this was another big theme in the interviewers, right? Like Wikipedia contributors never really intended for their content to be used by machine learning models. Um, Obviously, the license is allowing that to happen, or so far it's allowing it to happen. But I think when we're going to have more understanding of the ways that these companies are um, extracting and exploiting the data that altruistic volunteers are contributing, then we have more of a problem. Like who wants to contribute if that is one of the end results of your editorial contributions? Okay, so here's another quote. The ethical problem that I hear about most frequently from Wikipedians is that the situation doesn't seem fundamentally fair. The editors produce this content without compensation. It is openly licensed. And then these big tech companies make so much money from large language models. Now, I don't know how much money the tech companies are making from large language models versus how much investment. I don't have any of that data at hand, but we know most of the big tech companies are doing fine. So it is a particular kind of issue in that sense as well, right? And that this particular idea of contributor alienation is one, to be honest, that I wanted to learn more about. I had kind of sensed that this might be an issue, but I wanted to learn more about. So I had some of that idea going into the research project. Um, Finally, systemic bias, this was also part of that key finding. We're learning that large language models, because they're trained on Wikipedia and Wikipedia is heavily weighted, we know that Wikipedia is an imperfect system when it comes to systemic bias. So some of the same kinds of biases that Wikipedia suffers from are basically going to perpetuate in these large language models, right? Um, Wikipedia obviously extends English as a dominant language, and training large language model on this data exacerbates existing gaps in access to technology and the internet, particularly for speakers of less dominant language. Okay, so here's a quote from one of the interviewees. There's a concern around equity, leaving people behind or forcing people to use language that are not their native languages. They're the language of the colonizers. So the way that, and it's not only Wikipedia, right? It's the larger information ecosystem and the larger internet that is more English dominant, that is going to make English language, large language models more effective, right? Um, but yeah, I think the systemic bias around linguistic equity is perhaps more pronounced than other particular biases around gender or race, for instances. And that led to these interviewees highlighting the linguistic issues a bit more than some other possible systemic biases. Okay. This slide I should have separated into two because it's a lot, right? But think back to all of my key findings. I think I had six of them. So what do we do with that? Like, I don't want this project to just be a kind of a doom and gloom type piece. I really want it to be actionable, thoughtful. I want to move the community, the Wikimedia community especially, to be thinking about these particular issues. Um, and here are some of the things that we can do. Transparency and attribution in large language model applications, right? So data provenance, where is this particular query coming from, right? I think that's easier with some models that incorporate kind of a live web search than it is with other models that rely on a dated kind of static training data set, right? But I think that we can advocate for, especially when Wikimedia content is being used, for it to be attributed, right? That's part of the CC by SA license. We also need to kind of band together as a Wikimedia community to demand reciprocity from big tech, either in the form of alternate licensing models. This was a big theme from the interview that I didn't get to talk a whole lot about, as well as philanthropy back to Wikimedia Foundation, which had Google especially has a long history of charitable donations to the Wikimedia Foundation. Um, but I think we can continue to push for that, right? If they are relying so heavily on the data that we produce. Support initiatives to diversify the Wikipedia editor community, encouraging contributions from underrepresented groups and languages. Obviously, this is going to help mitigate some of the systemic bias. This is already happening, right? The Wikimedia movement, your all's community here today, there's a lot of this great stuff happening all over the movement. Encourage and continue future audience experiments. This is a particular team in Wikimedia, so that basically we're understanding, how do we attract readers now with not only generative AI, but short form video platforms and social media, et cetera, right? Encourage the development of large language models that prioritize explainability and transparency, providing users with insights into how they retrieve and process information, educational initiatives, especially for critical literacy, and this is so important for me. Um, continue to like just champion and cheerlead Wikipedia. And then explore AI assisted tools to enhance human editors' contributions without replacing them, right? And some of this is being done by MF teams already. But I think that we can redouble our efforts in terms of some of this. It's important to remember that, you know, the it's the people. It's the people that make Wikimedia, the movement, so amazing, right? And knowledge itself is human. And we need to keep those people, the community, in mind as we kind of move into um, a very different space for knowledge creation, knowledge search, query, etc., with these generative AI models. Okay, thank you so much. I think we have some time for questions. I know there's been some requests for the slides. So let me make sure that I can get you all those as well. But while I'm doing that, are there any comments or questions?
Hi, Matt. This is Anuj again. I just wanted to say that your work is truly brilliant. I'm not seeing too many people have such a deep, nuanced view of how things are progressing. So, thank you so much for doing this very important work.
Thank you so much, Anuj. That really means a lot. I posted a link in the chat. See if that works. I put it's on my Microsoft work accounts, but I usually end up putting it on Meta, which I can do. I just haven't gotten around to yet. But make sure that you can access it there first, and then we'll go from there.
I have a question, Matt.
Yeah.
So I'm really concerned, obviously, about the commons shrinking, but simultaneously, I also find a lot of potential in the accessibility to knowledge that LLMs are creating. And I see them, as you rightly said, they're a quaternary source, a different source of that accessibility. For example, in terms of learning computer coding, I found LLMs to be a lot more helpful than, let's say, combing through a common source like Stack Overflow. So I'm just kind of trying to think about how do we balance these two impulses, while on the one hand, people like me want to preserve and nurture the commons areas, but on the second hand, we also want to nurture what LLMs are doing for the kind of accessibility to knowledge that they can create, especially the not for profit, not big tech, but small localized models being created by people who are also contributing to commons. So, any thoughts on how to create that balance?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and you're bringing up coding, especially. I mean, a lot of this same conversation applies to GitHub community and GitHub's Copilot, which is
Yeah,
different from
exactly.
Microsoft's Copilot because they have been training that on GitHub for a long time, from my understanding. I think it has to do, but I think if we are going to find a balance, and I think we will find a balance, it has to do with people and communities coming together a little bit more to kind of find common ground. I mean, I think that generative AI applied in Wikipedia could be amazing for things like readability, right? Um, a lot of
Yes.
a lot of Wikipedia articles are above the average reading level of the users, right? They may be too technical or too jargonistic. They're also a lot of Wikipedia articles are very long, And we know that readers just do not spend that much time on those articles actually going through every single thing. So if we had integrated some generative AI capabilities inside of Wikipedia's platform, that could mean, translation, that could mean taking the reading level from a particular lexile to another lexile. And it could also aid editors and contributors, right? So we need to find new ways to make editing and contributing to the commons important, fun, and easy, right? I think some generative AI applications could certainly help with that. But we also really need some of the big tech companies that have these flashy Gen AI models to come out and say the reason that these models are working is because of things that are in the digital commons, things that you all have built over these years, right? We need that kind of like acknowledgement and transparency for people to feel like, okay, this isn't just happening in the shadows. Like this isn't just a black box, which a lot of my research I was disappointed that I didn't get to better understand exactly how it was working, right? But I think only the people who are really doing that training
Right.
are the ones that knows. It's such a black box, and that's something that I think needs to change.
Awesome, thank you. I think I love the idea of a kind of LLM interface within Wikipedia built by the Wikimedia people. I think that would be really helpful.
Hmm.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for the talk. I actually came in late, so I missed the first half. But based on some of your recommendations, this was just something that just occurred to me. So if fewer people contribute to Wikipedia, and a lot of LLMs are learning based on Wikipedia, then don't you think that the models are going to depreciate over the years if that continues happening? So then these companies probably do have a vested interest in actually giving back and making sure that people continue to edit Wikipedia. So isn't that something that Wikipedia can leverage going forward? The companies themselves are going to lose if fewer people contribute ultimately. So I was wondering if that's, something that came up in your conversations or.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Absolutely, it did come up in the context
Mhm,
of kind of like commons depletion, as well as the way that these large language models are really dependent not only on the kind of like reliable and vastness of Wikipedia as a training data set, but also the fact that it is constantly being updated, right? So they can continue
mhm,
to come back and renew. Um, one of the interviewees said something that really made me pause. Basically, you could have a competitor to Wikipedia come in and use generative AI. I mean, and we've already seen Perplexity's capability and some of these models' capabilities to
mhm.
produce something that looks exactly like Wikipedia, right? On kind of on the spot,
Yeah.
um, which was quite an alarm bell for me. But the same interviewee at the same time also said that nobody wants to see Wikipedia die. Like Wikipedia is the internet. Like it is like the promise of the internet and early Web
True.
2.0 and
Yeah.
so many of those
hmm
utopian ideals that those of us kind of coming up in the 90s were like, oh, this is what the internet is supposed to be, we thought,
hmm
right? So I don't think anyone wants to see it go away. And I think when it came down to it, you would have big tech players kind of like infusing money in campaigns and those types of things to kind of keep people interested. But I definitely think Wikimedia should leverage the fact that yes, it is our community that powers generative AI.
hmm
I think that is such a great kind of like point to make.
hmm Thank you.
Yeah,
And thanks again for sharing all this information. I learned so much just in the few minutes I've been here. So thank you.
absolutely. Happy to.
Matt, hi, this is Anuj again. I have another question. You mentioned potential pathways for reciprocity between big tech and LLMs, and Malavika also gestured towards that. What forms do you think that might take? Would it be like maybe monetary kind of reciprocity, or um, credit and attribution is just one way? I'm also thinking of maybe corporate social responsibility initiatives. I don't know. So
Hmm.
just thinking out loud, what specific concrete ways do you see that might happen, or would you like to see that happen?
I think for me, like as someone who's been very concerned with information literacy among my students, data provenance and attribution is the most important thing and the most important way that um, these tools could be a little bit more show that reciprocity. Money obviously is great for the Wikimedia Foundation. Google's been
Right.
funding a lot of, yeah, I mean, been funding a lot of or has given to Wikimedia Foundation in the past. I'll just say that. But I think more important than money is, like you said, some kind of social awareness campaign to actually show it's, if we just say Google, to actually show, Google consumers that this whole thing is so interconnected. Every big tech company wants to brand their own generative AI to bring more people to the product and to bring more people to the brand. But so much of the generative AI is based on an ecosystem. It's all connected, right? And a lot of it is drawing from the commons, and they need to acknowledge that, and they need to put that into some of their marketing and branding. I think that could go a long way, just being more transparent and open about the fact that, yes, your particular model might be proprietary, but it's being built off the commons.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Are you planning to take this research project forward in any ways beyond these six participants?
That's a great question. We'll see what comes of it. I hadn't thought of it yet. I'm hoping to see it published. Um, and of course, balancing a couple of other research projects as well. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what comes of it. I'd like to continue to follow this work. This work is very meaningful to me. But I don't have any concrete plans as of yet.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, Matt. I had a question. One first, very useful talk. Thank you very much for helping me think about this in so many different ways. Um, I was hoping if you could talk about. I love the fact that since many people talk about how ChatGPT or these LLMs is trained on like data in a bad way on the commons, they're like, oh, it has problems to it, and like, oh, it can hallucinate in a way that can't be the starting point for these arguments because then devalues that data that's collected. But it's also trained on Reddit in some ways. So I'm hoping you could like help me differentiate those two conversations of is there do we treat the data training on Reddit in the same way as the way we treat it trained on the commons of Wikipedia, or are those two different ways that we should be thinking about data sets that it's trained on? I hope that question makes sense in some type of way.
Oh yeah, it's a
Okay.
great question. It's a great question. I was at Wikimania, which was where that group photo was from that I showed, and I was in a panel on generative AI, and I had brought up how important it is to say this came from Wikipedia and to attribute like inside some of these applications. And someone said, "Well, that's going to make Wikipedia look bad because these applications are known for their hallucinations, right?"
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting question because you have people saying that they're going to hallucinate, they're engines of misinformation. And so why would you want to get Wikipedia involved with that? And who's really to blame with that? And I can't, in my understanding, Wikipedia has a bit more structure than Reddit, but I'm not as familiar. And it has a bit more kind of like policy in terms of like what um, content policy, basically neutrality, verifiability, reliability than Reddit, but I'm not as familiar with Reddit because,
Yeah.
I think that the upvote and the types of information that's on Reddit, they might be a little bit more informal, personal recommendations or all kinds of things, really. Um, they're going to have to be weighted differently in the training, and I'm not exactly sure how that would play out, but I think it's a great point.
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, because I think when people come back to like, oh, look at the hallucinations that come from public data, it's often Reddit based training issues, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and the way that Wikipedia, I think, does not have that same anyway. But thank you so much. It was very useful to hear you talk about this.
Awesome.
I think there are no more questions, right? And we're almost done with the time. Thank you, everyone. A special thanks to Dr. Vetter for such an engaging and informative session, for reminding us to how to be more critical of the information that we are getting from these generative AI projects like ChatGPT, Copilot, and Gemini, as he told us. And a very special thanks to all the participants. And I can clearly see everyone enjoyed this session. Really, really good. Um, so, for the participants, if you have any feedback or suggestions, you can write to us at program@dcwwiki.org. I'm going to share it in the chat box. Or if you have any topics in your mind you want to be discussed in the upcoming conversation hours in the future, or any speakers you would like to see, um, I'll be dropping the email in the chat box for that. We also have a Telegram group you can join for the information related to the conversation, or the link for the same would be shared also here. Yes, thank you everyone again for joining. I'll be sharing the link just in a minute. Here you go.
Thank you so much, Ariba and Afi and DCW for having me. It really means a lot to be invited to get to speak about some of these, critical questions that are really just so invigorating to me. So thank you all, and I hope everyone has a great week.
Thank you everyone. Okay then. Bye bye.
Bye bye.